Hello, everyone. This is Angel Arts. Welcome back. We just finished our interview session with Stefan Gagne, who is the one of the main writers for the Arcade Spirits series that I have also Let's Played on my channel. So we're very grateful that Stefan took 2 hours to chat with us. And this is, I guess, a part two where it's just Hannah and Roma and myself. It's just us three. I'm sorry, everyone, but we originally wanted to chat about the game anyway, even before we realized that Stefan could join us. So we're gonna be talking about I think mostly Arcade Spirits, the new challengers, but we probably will also start dipping into the first game as well. And just touch on some things that we weren't able to dive as deeply with Stefan. Spoiler warning again for anyone. We probably will be bringing up a lot of spoilers during the session. So if you are sensitive to that, by all means, play the game or watch somebody else play the game. So this is just an open forum. So whatever you all want to chat about, go ahead.
Well, I haven't actually seen, and because at the time of recording, your full playthrough of New Challenges isn't on YouTube yet, Hark. So I'd be really curious, just for me, to hear like your thoughts. It might be by the time this goes out that you're a little bit further along in your playthrough, but I'm very curious what you thought of the game.
I definitely loved the new game mechanics that TNC brought in. I was already super impressed by the first Arcade Spirits games.
Mhm.
Again, like shout out to Roma for introducing the series to me in the first place. And one of the main reasons why this was on my radar. Of all of the graphic novel games I had ever played, Arcade Spirit is definitely like one of my top favorites, simply because of not only the characters and the storyline is fantastic and great and relatable, but the game mechanics are awesome. I loved the rival that they brought on in the second game and how you can customize them and also have different personalities for the rival. That was super impressive
Mhm.
for me. I loved all
Mhm.
the elements of bringing in the previous cast and coming in. Some of my favorite like reactions was
Yeah.
definitely when my rival and my cousin from the previous game came together on the same screen, because I sort of soft predicted that that would happen, but I wasn't like, it was just on the back of my mind. I was like, I mean, that'd be cool if that happened. I'm not banking on it.
Mhm.
And then I remember the whole time I was like, I hope they mention Percy. I hope they mention Percy. I hope they mention Percy. And then Percy gets mentioned at some point. I'm like, yes, like this is it. This just
Yes.
threw it over the top. So there were so many moments that I thought they hit it out of the ballpark. There were so many things that
Hmm.
I thought, wouldn't it be cool if they did this, and then they did.
Yeah.
And that was just really satisfying and really validating for me. So overall, like I was just impressed by the execution of the game and how much thought was put into those little things. Like if you had,
Yeah.
as Stefan said, if you had the same last name as your previous character, you were cousins. If you had this exact same first name and last name, then they had this little fourth wall
Yeah.
breaking meta thing, and I was like, that is fantastic. So crazy, crazy impressed.
Yeah, no, as I said when we were chatting to Stefan, I think it really speaks to just how much thought the writing team put into the game, that they accounted for like, okay, well, what if the player's using the same name? What if they're using the same last name? Me myself, like when the game hinted, because the game hints like in the first game, like save your data. So I thought they might take that data and there might be like a passing reference to the former protagonist. You know, your name might crop up, or they might be like, oh yeah, when such and such did this, like something. I wasn't expecting like my protagonist to literally appear to me on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Like there they are, the protagonist that I created from the first game. So I completely agree with you, Hart. That was an amazing thing, and I bet that wasn't necessarily easy to do. I'm not a developer myself, but I can't imagine that was necessarily an easy thing to arrange. That is translated into the next game. So kudos on them for giving us that moment of, this is my protagonist. This is our world. They're our protagonist, and this is the love interest. Um, I think that was great. but yeah, I definitely got the impression from Stefan that they just put so much thought into the game, like little things, that so many kind of like different variables they have to account for when you're playing games like this, and making sure that the character's enough of a blank slate that the player can insert themselves. So yeah, I think really well done overall. Roma, did you like what was your first, like, I know you and me, we've played it a couple of times. I think Hart, you've played it twice. So like what was your first playthrough reaction to the game?
Gosh, I would say I mean, I remember commenting. I remember making a comment to you, Hark, at one point, just saying I didn't like I think I love this game even more than the first game, which I didn't think was possible. And I think the moment when I realized that during my first playthrough of TNC was actually, again, meeting myself from the previous game. But even like after that, I just had a lot of just jaw drop moments. Obviously the biggest one after that was the scene with Coda. I remember my jaw dropping, and I remember like feeling chills all over when that happened, and then feeling chills again later when I realized that my love interests were coming in to help me. Like my friends were like, okay, we need to pull her back. And like Stefan pointed out, it kind of a role reversal from the first game. And then the crazy fake out ending, my jaw dropped again.
So like for you guys, at what point did you start to question whether, because the game, major spoilers for anyone watching, but the game kind of leads you down a path of like Valkyrie is instigating, and then obviously that turns out not to be the case. At what point in your playthroughs did you peg that maybe it wasn't what the protagonist was assuming?
I kind of was picking up on that particular trope. Like, okay, they're dead set on Valkyrie being the villain, which means she's probably not. But at the same time, I in no way predicted that it was evil Iris, basically. Like that was definitely a surprise. And even more so that the evil Iris was connected to the rival. Like I did not see that coming at all. And I thought it was I thought it was actually really clever, like bringing Polybius back into the story instead of just being a cool cameo from the first game. It's like, no, we're gonna expand on that story a bit.
No, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because it caught me completely by surprise as well. I did not have that was a huge like boom reveal for me. I had no idea that it was connected to the rival, and more than that, connected to Iris, or at least their Iris. So I'm glad that I wasn't the only one, because after I finished playing it, I was like, were there hints that I was maybe just not picking up on here? And there might be, to be fair, but that was a huge like twist for me, but it was really enjoyable.
As someone who, as you know, does a lot of tabletop campaigns, and I love having twists in my tabletop stories. So because I am in that mindset, I have a tendency to anticipate. And unfortunately, I think it's to a fault, because sometimes I spoil things for myself, because I'm like going through the story, and instead of just merely enjoying the story for what it is, I'm thinking, okay, I think that there's going to be a plot twist here. Because, for example, I totally figured out like the twist in The Sixth Sense, like immediately.
Right.
And the problem was, this is on the day that it was released, I said it out loud to my group what I thought the theory was. And on hindsight, I shouldn't have, because obviously I didn't know I was right. But as soon as I opened my mouth, like the rest of the group weren't sure if I was right too, but they were already thinking about it. The seed was already planted. And when the reveal finally happened, they were so mad at me. They're like, Hark, you totally spoiled it. It's like, I wasn't doing it on purpose. I didn't know I was right. And so I've learned to keep my mouth shut since then. So, so for this game, I can't really turn it off. So I did anticipate that Valkyrie was probably not the actual villain. There was more something to that. However, I will say that the whole connection with evil Iris or Polybius and the rival was a surprise. So that did caught me off guard too. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I did like that there were hints, like there were kind of slow hints leading up to the big reveal that in hindsight maybe we should have guessed that this would play a bigger part. Like from when you first meet Grace, she mentions Sinus Lotion as one of the companies, and then later on talking to Loxley, he reveals yes, Sinus Lotion is where Polybius comes from, and therefore Iris is part Polybius basically. But and it's like just little things like that, and you have an encounter with Polybius when you go see Hamza, but I feel like by the time the reveal is made, it's kind of left your mind again, because like yes, it's there, the seed is there, but you've already gone through all this other stuff. You started a romance, you've done all this stuff, and then so that way when the reveal happens, it's like, I'm surprised. And it's like, wait, I shouldn't be that surprised.
I will say that something did kind of strike me as a little bit off at the point right before the final, where we have to use certain joysticks. At that point, when there's a bit of dialogue with when you're talking to Takeshi, where he says, "Oh, we've been sent these joysticks that everybody who participates has to use." At that point, I was like, that doesn't seem like something you would put in the game unless that means something. So
Chekhov's gun.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. Because it's there, I'm now thinking that's going to be important at some point. It's really interesting what Stefan said about the fake out that happens toward the end, that was like initially, or at least at some point in the process, considered to be the actual ending, that everything just kind of like messed up and they're fighting for survival, and you and your love interest are, trying to survive in this kind of like post-apocalyptic world. It's really interesting that at some point in the process they were thinking that would be the ending to the game. Like, how would you guys have reacted if that had have been like end game?
I'll let Roma go first.
I mean, I probably would have been like, gosh, I guess we're in Mass Effect now. Like Polybius is the Reaper, and we've been indoctrinated.
Or Skynet, or
yeah, any of those things.
Go ahead.
I mean, the first time I saw it, I probably would have been shocked and enjoyed it and looked forward to the next game. But like upon thinking back on it, I probably been like, you know what, this was a strange place for a cute little romance game to go, So I am kind of glad that they went back on that, because as when we were in Pengy Paradise with our love interest, and I was like, wait a second, this can't be real, right? I think it's better that was a fake out.
Yeah, I agree. When my knee-jerk reaction, if that actually was the ending, most likely would have been it wouldn't have landed well for me, because I think it's a cool concept and it's a cool idea, but it's not exactly like what I expected, which is fine if that's not what I expected, but it wouldn't have been what I would have wanted for an ending from a game like this, because I sort of signed up for it to be a cute romance with some sci-fi elements, and that's what I was hoping to get. So if they just ended it there, where it's a little bit of a darker ending, the happy ending is a little bit like ambiguous, and now there's this post-apocalyptic thing that's going on, I'm like, I don't know if that's necessary, like to sort of put into the ending. And so I will much definitely prefer that it was a fake out, even though it is tropey, but a necessary trope, so that we could sort of get back to more of like a happier like ending, especially if there wasn't going to be necessarily a third
Yeah.
game to like resolve everything. I much would have preferred like ending a series instead of just having this cliffhanger, because I hate that sometimes when movies have this cliffhanger ending and then nothing, they don't do anything else, like there's no other
Yeah.
sequel to that game. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's, yeah, they did the right call there.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely. And I like that even if there's no third game, I hope there will be, but even if there isn't one, I'm happy that both games they stand alone well. You know, they do well as standalone games, even with the kind of
Yes.
teaser after the credits. Like, okay, well, we have no idea what that means, so that's not really a cliffhanger. And if the and okay, if the third game comes, it'll be resolved. But if not, I'm happy with my love interest, and the
Yeah.
protagonist is happy. So it's not something that we have to wait until the next game to find out what happens or anything. So I think for this kind of game, having it be self-contained while still having references to the previous game, I think leaving it as it is, I think that's the best option.
I wanted to bring up something that came up for me, like a realization that came up for me during the interview with Stefan. And I want to thank Hannah actually for triggering that revelation, because I feel that I'm a work in progress. I know I'm not a perfect person. I'm constantly finding things about myself that I think I can be better at. And quite often, as we grow older, that you discover things about yourself that you wish you still had um, when you were young. Like there
Yeah.
are some things as you get older, through experiences, your personality changes. And I do feel that one thing that I know I was really strong with when I was younger that I'm not as strong with now, and I want to fix that, is empathy. And the reason I say that is because I'm Hannah was mentioning that she related so much with the first character because of the feeling of like self-doubt and like lack of, or depression, or lack of self-confidence, et cetera, et cetera. And I, during the my playthrough of the first one, I don't know if either of you caught it, I kept saying that it was hard for me to relate to the main protagonist because I just never had felt that way. As an
Yeah.
LGBTQ person, I've mentioned this before, I feel bad because it's hard for me to relate with a lot of my LGBTQ plus friends because they've gone through things like depression, which I never really did. I was always a confident kid, and I never like questioned my self-worth. And so that was like the biggest struggle for me in the first game, is like I felt railroaded sometimes that my character had to be this way and had to think this way instead of just letting go and just going with the flow. So I thank Hannah for letting me know that, because like I really should just not worry too much about whether this is in character of me personally, because even if I can't relate to this character, that doesn't mean that it is a valuable representation of other players who have been desperately looking for this sort of like feeling like that's me, like this game gets me. And I'm so happy that happened to Hannah, because it didn't happen with me. But I now value that and can appreciate it more. So thank you for identifying like that weakness that I want to try to get better at.
Yeah, I think sometimes even if you don't personally feel represented in a bit of media, it's still important that it exists. So, for example, with LGBTQ plus content,
Exactly.
let's say it's a bit of media that it's focused on kind of homosexuality. A heterosexual couple may not be able to relate to that content, but it's still very important that it exists. And it's an ongoing conversation that is happening across the board in a lot of different topics of representation. So yeah, I think I completely agree with you, Hark, that there will be people that kind of like play these games and don't necessarily feel what the particular protagonist is going through, or have not felt that. But I think Stefan did a really great job, and he described it himself in kind of appealing to people that have had those experiences or can relate it to something going on in their own lives. I think I was very impressed with, as I said, with Stefan, that the protagonists of New Challenges, they tie their self-worth entirely to winning and championships and victory. But that in itself, you could apply to anything, like what Stefan was saying about the toxic dream. For me, it was when I was unemployed, I felt I'm not contributing to society. I'm, worthless. And I was going to job interviews and not getting them. And, I was feeling so low. And in conversations with my husband, he would constantly tell me, he said, like, honey, your worth isn't your job. Like, that doesn't make you. Having a job doesn't necessarily give you value as a person. So that's what I got from that conversation, irrespective of the esports or the competitiveness or that drive to win. It's something that people can pick up and apply to their own lives.
I related to that, and I think many people can, when I before I met my husband, because for me, my dream was I was gonna have, the spouse and the kids and the cat and dog and picket fence, and I was gonna raise a family. Like, that was my biggest like aspiration in life, and what I thought I needed that to be happy. And so like, when all of my other friends were getting married and they were already having kids, and I was like the old maid within my group of close friends, there was a lot of pressure there. And I think that I came to a realization early on that you need to, regardless of whether I was going to find someone eventually, like, I needed to find a way to just be happy, like, without relying on that, like depending on that. Yes, I love the fact that I have kids now, and I love my husband, obviously, and I do feel like I'm living a very fulfilled life. But one of the things that we said during our wedding was, even before Colin and I met, we were happy. Like, we didn't need to necessarily meet each other to become happy. We were already happy without each other. But then when we found each other, it just added more. Like, that would even added more and enhance that happiness even further. So so that I can relate to that.
It's for that reason. I don't know how you guys finish your playthroughs, but it's for that reason that whenever I play, I've played several routes now of New Challenges, I always refuse the championship, because I want my protagonist to be okay with not getting that championship. I feel like that's the perfect end to their story. That's the perfect kind of point in which their character development should have done the work for the character to say, I didn't win, and that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. And personally, I feel like I've never felt compelled to accept the championship for that very reason that you're talking about. And it's like this whole, the whole purpose of this storyline was that, you as the player, or you as the protagonist, you realize that, the people that you need, the real people that make you happy, they're all around you. And this big goal that you have, it's not, it's cool to have if you manage to get it, but in the end, it's not completely necessary. So I feel like no matter how you look at it, whether you want your protagonist to end as a goal-driven person, I don't think they would accept the championship that way either, because there was cheating involved. They didn't even really compete, things like that. I feel like to accept it, no matter how you play it, feels like it kind of undermines the character of the protagonist. Someday I'll try it just to say I did, but but I've never personally been that compelled to accept it.
I was the exact same way. It was a very easy answer. It was a very easy choice for me, because that is the other thing. I definitely related more to the second protagonist in TNC because they were a little bit more confident. But where we didn't align was our ultimate definition of winning, like what our goals were. Because for them, winning meant I'm going to get this championship and be the very best that no one ever was. And I remember during my Let's Play, I was like, oh, that's your motivation. You know what my motivation is? Getting with these hot honeys and getting my romance. Like, that's what I want. So, you know, you do you, boo. I'm focusing on that really hot, like, Loxley dude over there, or the really cute Grace character over there, or the Jinx. Like, you know, that's your motivation. That's fine. And then when that choice came up, I was like, I don't care. Like, I just want my Loxley. I don't care. So, like, and the championship is whatever. So that's yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah. 100%. So what was it about Loxley, Hark? I'm sure that all of this is going to come out like with your Let's Play. So apologies if you're repeating yourself.
Yeah.
As it is not out yet on time of recording, I'm just curious, like what drew you to Loxley?
So I guess part of it was I wanted to like Domino more than I did, because I understand, and Roma and Hannah, I think, has mentioned this off camera, is Domino is an acquired taste. And I don't think I've like acquired that taste. I was friends with him just fine. I liked Domino as a friend. He was fascinating. But then he had these moments where I was like, I'm not comfortable with you. And there's no offense to that. It's just a comfort level thing. So I think by default, like if I was planning on doing a male to male, like that meant Loxley. Fortunately, I didn't feel like I was settling, because that was the biggest thing I was worried about. It's like, I don't think things are going to work out with Domino. I hope that like the other character that is male that I was going for, I don't feel like I'm settling. And I was so happy that I didn't feel like I was, because I just liked his free spirit, carefree personality. He's very, I'm a hopeless romantic, so the fact that he's got this accent and he's just very like gentlemanly, and just the idea of having a Robin Hood type character who's like, yeah, he like steals from the rich but he gives to the poor kind of thing, always fascinated me. So there definitely was a lot of similar themes between Loxley and Percy in that aspect, because Percy had all this money, but he was giving it to charity. And the reasons, what I love about the twist for me for Percy was that his motivations for winning like the Moopy game was not what I expected. And when he sort of revealed the whole backstory about his sister, and then the fact that he was also having heart problems too, and like he was trying to finish this for his sister before he passed, I was like, I didn't think it's possible to love you even more. So so yeah, Loxley is fun. However, like I said, when it came to the storyline, Jinx, I love Jinx's storyline, and I wish my biggest, like, no, it's not the disappointment, because that's the beauty of incentivizing replaying the game, is that I couldn't get to know everybody's story thoroughly. Like I had to keep there. You had to choose between hanging out with this person versus this person, but that's good, like by design. So like I would have loved to have learned more about Grace. I think that's the thing, because basically my priority when it came to talking to people was Loxley, then my rival, then Ben and Matt. And then then there was like everybody else. I guess it was like Jinx and Grace. It was like Jinx and Grace were sort of tied of who I would chat with next. And so I wish I learned more about Grace, but it's like, I have to go with Loxley though first. So yeah.
It's like when I saw the when I could see the pattern that you were going toward with Loxley, I was like, he's not going to learn anything about Rhapsody, is he? How dare you, Hark?
I want to though, but I want to. That'll be future playthroughs, I'm sure. There's like I wanted to learn more about Zapper too. I ended up not liking Zapper. I thought I was going to love Zapper a lot, but there something about the way that she at least portrays herself made it harder for me to connect. But
even before I watched your Let's Play, or at least the amount of it that's come out, I had a feeling you wouldn't like Zappa, to be honest, because Zappa, when you first meet her, she's quite forward in a flirtatious manner. And I know from watching other Let's Plays that you do that characters that exhibit those kind of personality traits, who are kind of assuming heterosexuality on the part of the player, doesn't tend to land well with you. So I didn't think that you would like Zappa, because that's essentially, whether she intends to or not, that's kind of what you're doing if you're a woman coming on to a guy that you don't know very well. You're assuming that there's some kind of base level of they could be attracted to you,
Right.
and so I didn't think you would necessarily take to Zappa, which but like I said, that's the beauty of these games. There's kind of something for everybody.
Everyone.
And I do appreciate that they at least took the time in routes like Zappa's to at least flesh her out so you understand her a little bit more.
Queen Bee surprised me, because when I first met Queen Bee, I thought that I wouldn't like her as much. But as the story progressed and I really got to understand her, she wasn't who I expected her to be. And I really ended up liking Queen Bee by the end of the first game. So it's really interesting, like, first impressions of people, and how that you can only take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it's definitely a sign of good writing, because I'm sure, like, for people like us that have played quite a lot of these visual novels, you can sometimes run into the issue where you choose to pursue a character, and actually when you start scratching under the surface, there's not an awful lot there. It's like more of what you already knew about them, and you don't necessarily always feel like the person that you started romancing is different from the person that you become as a couple at the end. So that is just one of the really good things about the Arcade Spirit series, is that the characters really do grow. And I meant entirely what I said, Stefan, about the fact that I love that they show the conflict as well. I think I played about 4 or 5 different routes in the first Arcade Spirit games, just because I wanted to see what the conflict was in that kind of end act, just to see what are some of the kind of issues that these couples would have kind of going forward, because that interested me a lot. But
I feel like that kind of conflict is also reflected in TNC with the final battle. So like your love interest gets to confront a shadow version of themselves. But one thing that I found very interesting about Jinx's path, if you pursue just Jinx, her shadow self is not herself, it's Grace. It's a shadow Grace. Yes.
I love that. Ooh.
And the reason for that is because Jinx is confident in herself. It's not herself that she has problems with. It's the idea that maybe she's letting Grace down, or she's letting the people that the one person that she trusts the most down. Yeah.
That is really interesting.
I love that.
It's very, very interesting. And that goes into a whole thing also, which was like, like she even says at the beginning, like, okay, I think I've got how this is going to go. I'm going to face an evil me, right? Which, if you're playing this game multiple times and you're at this part with Jinx, it's like, okay, so here's going to be the shadow Jinx. Let's see what happens. And it's almost a reflection of the player themselves. Like when you see Shadow Grace instead of Shadow Jinx, it's like, wait, what's going on here?
I wanted to ask you both the question that Hannah asked me, which is like, what is it that drew you towards the characters that you romanced, who you consider your main romance for each game? What drew you to them?
Well, in the first game, I romanced Naomi, and she's actually my canon romance. I really liked how passionate and knowledgeable she was about her craft. But then when you go on a date with her, at first she's very awkward and uncomfortable, just because she's so immersed in her own little world that when it comes to human interaction, she gets a little bit uncomfortable. And I was like, that's totally me. Like she reminds me of me in a lot of ways. But in the end, it's also very sweet. And so that was what drew me to her. My first time playing through with Grace and Jinx, I actually stumbled on the polyamorous route by accident. Like I just happened to pick the right options to unlock the poly route, and I didn't realize it. And
Mhm.
I liked both Grace and Jinx, and I was just getting to know them both very well. And then, and then, when you're helping Grace move to the new apartment, there's an option that comes up where there's 2 hearts instead of
Mhm.
just the 1 heart. And I was like, oh, does this mean I get extra love? So I clicked on it, and I didn't realize
Double hearts, extra love.
double hearts. And then the next thing to unlock the polyamorous route is you have to lose the match against Grace and Jinx. You have to lose the match against them. And I lost on purpose in that case because I was like, I don't want Jinx to clean the apartment. And so I just lost on
That's
purpose.
so sweet. That's
And
so
I
sweet.
and I didn't even realize I was propelling myself toward this polyamorous route.
That's
And
cool.
then when I realized
Wow.
it was an option, okay, I guess I'm doing this.
Don't you love accidental polyamory?
I really do.
I just fell into this relationship.
I just wanted the double love hearts.
I just wanted to double love hard.
Yes. But what drew me to both of them, Grace, I loved her first sight. I loved her right away. As soon as she popped up on screen, I said yes. And she loves RPGs. She loves long RPGs. I mean, of course, I love that. Jinx was very like I liked how blunt she was about her disability, and I also liked the fact that she doesn't let that define her. And so that obviously propelled me toward wanting to know more about her. And then as the game progresses and you see just how close they are, and you see like even if you're not pursuing them in a polyamorous way, just seeing how close they are, like their relationship, their friendship is like I honestly love seeing characters forming these very close friendships with each other, not just with you. So it makes them feel like real people, that they have relationships outside of the main character. And I really enjoy that for them. And so when I had the option to be let into that, like I thought it was very respectful. I thought it was very tastefully handled, and it's very sweet also. And then I'm gonna gush about Rhapsody a little bit.
Please go. Please.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes. Remind me, Hannah, have you done Rhapsody's route?
I've done Rhapsody's route,
You
yeah.
have done Rhapsody's route. Okay. So the thing that interested me about Rhapsody was like I admit at first it was just their appearance, and but also the fact that they are that they were basically the coach of the team, like like there was no one like that in the previous game. And I said, oh, okay, so we have a basically protagonist, but this is an opportunity for me to learn even more. This could be an interesting growing opportunity for the protagonist. So I became very interested in learning more about Rhapsody as well. Obviously, the first playthrough, I went the poly route. I didn't romance Rhapsody, but second game, immediately I went to Rhapsody. And one thing that surprised me is that when you spend, I can't remember how many routes have this moment, but there's a moment after you've spent a lot of time with Rhapsody, if you have a very good relationship with them, they flat out tell you, I feel very close to you, and I just want to know if you feel the same way about me. And and you have the option of basically saying, yes, I'm interested in you at that moment, or saying, I'm glad we're friends.
Yeah. Zappa, I don't think every route has it, but Zappa had it as well, where like I think it was at Max, where I think you run off to like go to a party or something, and Zappa's like, hey, do you think we could be a thing? And you can kind of shut it down there or say, yes, I like you. I don't think every route has it, but a couple of them have a kind of earlier point in which you can kind of say, hey, yeah, I think we should,
Mm-hmm.
give this a try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really I really enjoyed that. And just every moment I spent with Rhapsody, I just found myself enjoying myself. I just was really having fun with them. And I love their sense of humor also. But but yeah, like I just found myself very entranced by Rhapsody as well. So it's like I consider those relationships kind of my two mains.
Cool.
Yeah.
How about your mains, Hannah, or canon romance?
Yeah, so they're vastly different from Arcade Spirits 1 and Arcade Spirits 2. So Arcade Spirits 1, my very first romance was Queen Bee. I really like so I have different so I'm pansexual, and I have very different tastes for like men and women. They're very different. So in Arcade Spirits New Challenges, my first one was Loxley. So you can't get more different. And I like Loxley. To be honest, Loxley is very much like my husband, very well spoken.
Yes, I can definitely see that. 100%.
Yes, well spoken, snazzy dresser, very gentlemanly, chivalrous, very much like my husband. And so that was kind of more to my taste there. So he was my canon New Challengers. Queen Bee is, so with women, I like them very like assertive, very fiery, very like strong-willed. And I think if I had to like try to assess why, I think it's because I don't like, when I play dating sims or visual novels, I don't like being like the chaser, the instigator. I don't like being the one that delivers the overly flirty lines and kind of puts that out there. I kind of like to feel less like I'm imposing the fact that I want to be in a relationship on them. I want there to be a little bit more of like I want them to also take a little bit of initiative in, expressing how they're feeling, and, having a more kind of dominant role in the relationship, in the romance. So, and Queen Bee had that in spades. She's a very, like, from the second that you like establish a romantic relationship, she says, this is the kind of relationship I want. She lays her boundaries out. And, I just find that very attractive. So yeah, I did watch your playthrough, Hawk, and I could see like that you weren't necessarily a big fan of Queen Bee at first, and I do understand why, because she comes across as, particularly in the beginning, very abrasive, and the F-bombs and the swearing left, right, and center, and all that sort of thing. Which I do agree that, like, for somebody who's kind of like more maybe soft spoken or more tactful, it maybe doesn't like align very well. But for me, she was very much like on my wavelength for what I find attractive in women. So yeah, she was kind of my first romance. And then, like I said to when we were talking to Stefan, then once we got toward the end of the relationship, where she kind of came back at me when basically what happens in the Queen Bee route is, so she gets offered to join the 4 Heavenly Kings. I think that happens in the epilogue of every route, but in Arcade Spirits 1, they basically invite her to join the team house, which is far away from the arcade that you're the manager of. So you kind of quite rightly say, well, how are we supposed to kind of have a relationship if you're like across the country living in this game house? And she kind of comes back with, well, hang on, I thought we weren't gonna, be too serious. I thought we weren't gonna like put a label on this relationship, and now you're telling me I can't go and live in this, esports house. And so we have that conflict, and I'm thinking, this is like a very Queen Bee conflict to have. This is a really good show of her character, and it's a good continuation of conversations you've had before. I wonder what the other routes are like, what the conflict is, like what the central kind of narrative of those relationships are. So I just kept playing, and I think I ended up doing most of the routes in the first one, and I'm making my way through most of the routes in New Challenges as well. But those were my two, Queen Bee and Loxley.
One thing that I love about Percy is that
Mhm.
versus Teo and Gavin, and of course this is more obvious in the beach scene, is that Gavin
Mhm.
and Teo, they are more of the mainstream classic, like hot build with the
Yep.
abs and the
Mhm.
Yep.
muscles, versus Percy, who has a dad bod.
Mhm.
Which, don't get me wrong, a lot of people like they're into that. Don't get me wrong,
Mhm.
but it is not like the mainstream idealized physical like attractiveness of the male figure.
Yep.
But it didn't matter to me because I thought Percy was a super attractive character, like
Mhm.
not just in personality but also their look too. And I just
Mhm.
like that they were able to like provide that variety.
Yeah.
Even Ashley, I think Ashley, what I liked about her is I think between all the girls, she wasn't like the Barbie, like super
No.
skinny.
Yeah.
She was a little more curvy, and I'm like, I like that she was a little more curvy, and she's beautiful
Mhm.
too. So
Yeah.
so that was really neat. And the thing with I mentioned this too during my playthrough is that with Gavin and Teo, what I found really interesting is Teo is very much not my type physically.
Yeah.
But I love this personality. I thought his personality was
Yeah.
super attractive. And then Gavin is more of my type physically, like more
Mhm.
so than even Percy. Um, and his personality I got along with, but I
Mhm.
felt that his personality and my personality were so alike in many ways that
Mhm.
I thought we would clash,
Yeah.
or at the very least not be able to cover each other's weaknesses because we were so much
Mhm.
the same. We would just not complement each other very well. So I thought that
Yeah.
was really different, really unique, that I can definitely, I loved all three of the male
Yeah.
choices from different reasons.
Mhm.
And then Percy
Mhm.
like ended up winning out, but yeah,
Yeah.
I like that aspect of that game.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said about Ashley because so I did her route in Arcade Spirits 1. I don't know, did you do her route, Roma?
I've done it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so for those that haven't, one of the kind of central conflicts in Ashley's route is that she is struggling with her identity. So one of the things that she really likes about cosplaying is it allows her to kind of express how she wants to express, and so that's why she kind of does like gender bent kind of cosplay characters as well. So because she does what kind of feels comfortable and feels right for her, and
Mhm.
cosplay allows her to kind of explore that. So toward the end of that route, she's kind of wrestling with, do I necessarily identify as female, as she, her, or is it more kind of non-binary? So I just thought that was interesting because you said, Hart, that she doesn't necessarily present as the traditional kind of Barbie, like you said, where she's very classically feminine. That internally, I think that is because that was an intentional choice on the designers, because she's wrestling with her identity.
Yep. And it was also very interesting to have a relationship with a character who is in the process of figuring themselves out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like everyone else was like pretty, like, this is who I am, this is how our relationship is and stuff. While Ashley's date on the beach, like, she chooses that moment to basically come out to you. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm a woman, I'm not sure if I'm a man, I'm not sure if I'm something else. And in the end, your character is just like, you're just Ashley for now. And
Yeah.
yeah, and which I thought was great. And then to have Rhapsody in the second game be a confident non-binary person, like, uh, when they face their shadow self, like, their first reaction is, wow, I look good. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so just different levels of confidence with every character, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
really great. And having two very different characters kind of sharing that one thing, that they're kind of non-binary. And
Yeah.
I've heard, I haven't been able to confirm this because I haven't carried over Ashley's route into the second game, but I've heard that by the time the second game comes and you meet yourself, uh, and your character references their relationship with Ashley, Ashley has apparently come out as non-binary, and they're now going by they them. That's what I've heard. I haven't been able to confirm this, but I've heard that.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Like the process continued after, the process of discovering themselves continued after the game was over, which I think is really cool.
I sort of answered this question for myself when we were interviewing Stefan. But for a hypothetical future game, whether it's an Arcade Spirits 3, whether it's the next project that Stefan had mentioned, what types of characters or what types of relationships would you be interested in seeing or having represented? For those of you who didn't see the interview, like mine would be, as I said, a positive representation of a person of faith. I thought would be really cool, since I don't get to have that really ever. And then the other one was, if you're going to do a polyamorous relationship, have it with that again, a positive representation, a healthy representation of polyamory that happens to be with either two other men or a man and a woman, and not just women only. That's my request. But how about the two of you?
Kind of expanding on the person of faith. I would love to see a positive representation of like a person who's Muslim. Because in the character creator, you can see the hijab, and which is very cool, but it doesn't really, the protagonist doesn't get into their faith or anything. So like I feel like in America and in Western countries mostly, like I feel like Christianity is very, obviously very common. A lot of people know about Christianity, while Islam is misunderstood in a lot of ways, and Islam is also there's kind of a stigma against it because of the political climate and stuff. But I would love to see not just a positive representation of Islam, but a positive representation of like a progressive Muslim, like something that kind of changes what people might think about conservative Islam or something. Like I learned a lot about it just by talking to my wife, and to see that being represented in a game, I think would be incredible.
I think it could be really interesting in terms of diversity of gender identities to explore a transgender character. And by that, I mean somebody who is transitioning or has transitioned. Because I know that, there's obviously the inclusion of non-binary characters, which can be said to be under the kind of transgender umbrella, but somebody who's kind of gone through a kind of physical transition, I understand that there are like unique kind of like experiences that people who have that identity go through, and it would be really interesting to see that kind of develop, and how there are kind of like elements of that relationship that you would have to learn about in order to support your partner. The other thing, kind of more a diversity of character rather than identities, but I think I would really enjoy in a future game, like a relationship where the person in question is outside of your kind of interest circle. So in both Arcade Spirits, they're kind of in the world of like arcades, and or in esports, in new challenges. I would quite like the idea of like somebody coming into that space, or like you introduce that space to them. So they're like, I don't understand any of this. They might also like not necessarily kind of gel with it immediately, kind of like a rival man sort of thing, or like something where they don't necessarily understand the world, but through like their relationship with you, you're able to like introduce them to it, and they kind of, they understand and support and cherish your interests. Because I think one of the interesting things for me in relationships, when you examine them in these games, is just how you change together, how you grow together. And so I think it could be really interesting to see your character have a positive influence on somebody who, is not in the same space as you. So I think that could be a really interesting thing to explore, whether in a future Arcade Spirits or the other project that Stefan mentioned, somebody that's kind of not from your world, but you're able to kind of like, you know, engage with each other's interests and hobbies. So
I'll expand on that question even further, and let's say specifically a hypothetical Arcade Spirits 3. What are some things in general that you would love to see in a third game? Whether it's story or if it's just game mechanics. They introduced a lot of cool game mechanics in the second one. I didn't know if there was any others in the third one that you thought would be kind of neat.
I really liked in New Challenges the order and chaos system that they have with Iris, and how what Iris learns about how to interact with humanity and what behaviors are and aren't acceptable comes from how the player kind of what the player tells her. Iris, you can hack people's face walls to make sure that they're good enough to come into the arcade, or no, Iris, you cannot breach data privacy. Like, things like that shape kind of both the epilogue that you get and also like how Iris responds to certain things as they unravel in game. In New Challenges, it's a very simple system of like, I think there's like, I mean, I maybe should have asked Stefan when he was here, but it seems to be kind of it kind of stacks up each choice you make that links with order. There is a point towards Iris having the order personality. Each choice you make that is linked to chaos goes towards Iris having a chaotic personality. I would love to see in future games, if there is one, like an expansion of that, where like Iris will actually like remember certain things that you've said that she can or cannot do. And question, kind of like Edie in Mass Effect 3, where she every now and then she kind of comes to you and she says, do you think I should alter my programming to, do the least amount of harm or something like that, and then she'll remember that and then call you up on it later when an opportunity like that presents itself. Says, well, you said that in this situation I can do this. So something like more in depth like that, where Iris remembers the decisions that you make and the moral stances that the character takes.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking an interesting direction the third game could possibly take would be like, if let's say the new protagonist does mostly like, goes to the arcade, goes to the local arcade, but they interact with other people like online when they're at home. So they go to the arcade, they play, they have this game that they love, but when they go home, they kind of enthuse about it with people online. So most of their interactions are done not in person, but online. So you're talking to these different people. And then maybe at some point you say, hey, I would like to meet all of you and see how you are in real life. And maybe some of them aren't exactly how they've presented themselves, and maybe some of them are, or it's just not in the way you expect or something. So I think that could be a very interesting direction.
I love that, because that actually ties in very well with the tabletop campaign that I'm running right now on my channel, the Ready Persona 1, because a lot of it is they're all playing this virtual game and they don't know a lot of the players in real life, but then they gradually do, and it's not always who they expect them to be. So totally get that. I have a pipe dream idea, which I think is probably not realistic, at least now. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something for Arcade Spirits 3, but I just think in a visual novel sense, in general, because I do recognize this is probably going to be a programming nightmare. But I love how recently we've had more games of co-op, like choice-based games, like The Quarry and as Dust Falls. So if we were to, like, for a moment ignore the logistical programming nightmare, it would be kind of neat is if in the third Arcade Spirits, two players would play the game co-op, and they would each have their own character, like sort of similar to like you have the protagonist and the rival, And then basically you would go through the story together. You would each make your own individual choices throughout the game. And you wouldn't necessarily be in the same room at the same time. Sometimes you would branch, like your character goes home, or your character goes on a date with this character, and then stuff happens. And then the other player goes on and stuff happens. And you just kind of follow each other's story. And then you would have the option of romancing each other. That would be interesting if you could romance each other.
Yeah.
Or characters in the the NPCs, or if you both were trying to go after the same PC, you could do a polyamorous thing with the three of you too, if you wanted to. So obviously, even writing for that would be so complicated because there's so much branching. There's enough branching when you only have one protagonist making all the choices. Never mind two. So like, but I know, so that's like a pipe dream. But if that ever becomes a thing, I would be crazy like impressed for someone to pull that off.
I feel like we're on the cusp of games like that being a little bit more common. You've got, your Quarries and Until Dawns where they're kind of creating more co-op experiences. In the visual novel world, you have games like Monster Prom and then Monster Camp, Monster Road Trip, As Dusk Falls, which we've recently played. Like, I think developers are starting to kind of tease the idea of kind of co-op and multiplayer kind of narrative experiences. Whether or not it takes off or not, I don't know, but it does seem to be an idea that's kind of floating around this space at the moment.
Yeah, and the thing that especially with something like Monster Prom, the interesting thing is you can work with someone to try to help them get with their preferred romance, or you can actively work against them and try to sabotage them.
That's true.
So like, imagine that in something like Arcade Spirits or other romance visual novels where you can decide to actively work against them and see how that affects the story.
You could play wingman or wing person,
Yes.
That would be interesting.
And now that I think about it, actually, that could complement the theme of the game quite well, because Arcade Spirits, obviously arcade games, they've historically been an experience that you can share with other people. So yeah, that's interesting.
I will say one thing about TNC that I wasn't too thrilled with was I didn't really like the segments where you played FOD2, where you actually played it. And that's just a personal thing. I mean, if other people liked it, that's fine. It's just, for me personally, I'm not a fan of the rock, paper, scissors mechanic for games like that. But that being said, I did enjoy that there was an option to skip.
Yes, it was. Yes. Perfect. Yeah. Yes, exactly. I thought that was the perfect answer for people like you who didn't like it as much. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was the same, Roma. I don't necessarily like mini games in my visual, like I don't need them. Like the narrative, the story, the relationships, that's what I'm playing for. I don't necessarily need mini games. And so I was the same. And that goes back to what I was kind of saying about, like, the writers were obviously very conscientious when they were writing, because someone at some point had the thought, well, we're putting this mini game in. I think Stefan said that the coding was, a little bit of a hassle for that. But, they're putting the game in, but they also had the thought that, okay, but what if somebody doesn't want to play these mini games? Or they just want to see what would happen if they won or if they lost. So I really appreciate that they put that in there, and I also skipped them. It wasn't for me. But I get other people that enjoy them, but I think it's great that they gave us that option.
Yeah, just in general, what I love about the games is that they give you so much freedom, really. Yeah. I love just from the character creator, like, you can decide not only your look, but what your pronouns are and how you're being referred to, and same thing for your rival as well, which I love. And so it's definitely a testament to the amount of care, I think, that they put into this game to really want to draw the player in and help to immerse them even further in the game.
I will say also, I like that there were at least I felt like there were more options to interact with like the people outside of your circle. So not just all the potential love interests, but Ben and Matt, or even at the end, you can talk to Queen Bee, you can talk to yourself, you can talk to, I think Hamza makes an appearance too. So like I did really enjoy that there were more opportunities like that to talk to them.
Yeah, that's definitely something that they've obviously they improved on from like Arcade Spirits, because they already were good at that in Arcade Spirits 1, where there were times where it'd be like, you're not going to get a chance to talk to everybody, but you get to choose where you go. And they definitely had more scenarios where that was the case. Like, here's the map, here's where the people are, you decide who you talk to.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like Hart would have probably preferred being able to talk to everybody, just have them go down in a line and chat to every single person.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Part of me in general would have loved to learn about everybody, but I know I could replay the game to do that. So it wasn't that big of a deal. And I kind of liked that there was that limitation, because, the reality is you sometimes you can't interact with every single person, and you kind of have to prioritize who you're going to actually form like deep, solid relationships with. And yeah, I don't know. I liked it that they did put the limitations in, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. It's like, what are your priorities for this?
Right.
Because in real life, you can't necessarily go, well, I have all the time in the world, I'm going to talk to every single person here.
Yes, exactly. What were some of your favorite moments from either game that we haven't already talked about?
Francine's death hit me hard. In the first game. I didn't I sort of had an inkling that something like that might happen, because it was clearly like it was getting to a point where she was showing up kind of less to the arcade, and I felt like there were some parts where I felt maybe they were foreshadowing it, but it was really sad, especially you have a conversation right beforehand where you're kind of saying, well, what why should I get to speak for the fate of the arcade? Like, this is yours. And she essentially tells you that no, this is ours, this is as much yours as it is mine, and I trust you to make the right decision. And that complete faith that she had in the character, and then for you to kind of like come in and everybody's upset, and to find out what happened. Yeah, and it is something that the game kind of lingers on as well. It isn't something that's kind of breezed past. And even later, when you kind of come out of your, whether it's depression or kind of what the funk that your character finds themselves in, you'll all do a toast to Francine. I just think that was well handled, and it was a really kind of like low point in the game in terms of the character feeling kind of sad, and it affected me. I got a bit emotional.
By the way, did you know in the first game, if you name the new arcade Francine's, you can unlock hidden dialogue?
Oh, that's cool. I love that. Thank you for that.
I feel like there are so many like hidden
Easter
secrets
eggs
in these games.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Wow.
For me, this is something that's not unique just to Arcade Spirits, but I love it when games suddenly put you in control of someone that's not the main protagonist. Like, I love the moments in the first game, and I think we did do this in TNC, where you're actually controlling another character, and I think you end up controlling like whoever you're romancing, whoever you had a deep friendship with. And I love that because it not only gives the character that you presumably really are attached to more screen time, but it gives you like their perspective of things. It gives you something fresh to do, so that you're not just controlling the main protagonist the whole time. And so I loved that. Was one thing that I thought in the first game was like that, where I thought in my head, wouldn't be nice if they did this, and then they did it, and I'm like, yeah, you totally hit it out of the park.
Yeah,
that decision. So
And it hammers home as well that relationships are give and take. You as the protagonist at this point have been putting the effort in. You've been talking to them. You've been helping them. You've been, there for them emotionally. And in both games, the point in which the main character's love interest takes over is after your character has kind of hit a low point, and they are helping to pick you back up.
I love
They
that.
are,
Yes,
yeah,
I love that.
exactly.
Mhm.
How about you? What any other favorite moments from either game that we didn't mention already?
Mm. I think Grace on the roller coaster.
Aw.
Yeah, yeah.
Poor Grace.
Um,
but but I think uh, another big thing, kind of expanding on what we've already talked about the your love interest helping you back up, basically. Um, a moment in TNC that got me a little teary-eyed actually was after the intervention, when your love interest kind of confronts you, and you have to basically tell them how you feel. And the text comes up and there's no good answer, but each answer is based on your personality, so you can pick different options. But you start pouring your heart out in about how you relate to Coda, and you're desperate not to turn out like him. And it's kind of it's a reaction of that's based in trauma. Like they're kind of backsliding into that old mindset of winning is everything, and that's what drove them into this place. And having your character stand there, and you have to choose which option, and none of them are good. You just have to hope that it's what you want them to say. It's like it was a moment that actually kind of got me a little teary-eyed because it's like I've been there. I've been in situations where it's like I know nothing I say will make this better, but I have to say something right now.
yeah, the whole Coda thing. I wanted to hug him so badly. I felt, yes, he was a jerk to us in originally, but
Mhm.
as things progress, I felt more and more bad for him. And
Mhm.
um, when what happened, like I really really had a hard time with that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and in the same vein, when in the first game, when your character gets shot, or at least my character got shot,
Yeah.
that was like, whoa, wait, we're going there? Like, I didn't think this game was going to go there. It's like that got dark really fast. Like, it was a total, like, it hit me in the face. Like, I didn't realize that was going to be a thing in this game. So that was a really interesting, like shocking moment for me in the first one. Um, but another moment that I really enjoyed and had fun with in the first game was when there was the intervention, and
Yeah.
people were talking about, let's make our own arcade, or let's form our own arcade, and you had so many choices from what the arcade was going to be called, and
Yeah.
who was going to be like the sponsor, who was going to fund it,
Mhm.
and like, what do we have? A restaurant? Do we have prize game? Like, you could choose what type of arcade, like the amount of options and
Mhm.
customization
Mhm.
was brilliant, and it really helped to make you feel like, I own this place and I can make it the way that I envision it. I
Mhm.
love all the choices they gave there.
Mhm. It's a shame that in TNC, I think they try to do that with things like which sponsor that you take for your team.
Yeah.
But it's a shame really, because in the next level you lose it. So it's like that was a decision that I don't know how you guys approached it, but that was a decision I really agonized over. That I was like, okay, like because all of them have like drawbacks, all of them have flaws, and I was really like trying to reason it out, like which sponsor would be best for the team. And then like in the next level, unfortunately, like whichever sponsor
Whichever
you
one.
pick, they drop you.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's a shame, because like it's links to what you were saying, Hark, in that it kind of like it helps to like make it feel like it's your playthrough, and these are your choices. But I really enjoyed that in the first game as well, the creating your own arcade and deciding, like, yeah, you're right, there were loads of choices. There was who's sponsoring it, what kind of arcade it was, like, is it going to be like more restaurant, family friendly, prize games, like,
Yeah.
They did a really good job of that.
Is there anything else that you thought, if you were to critique the game, even if it was nitpicky, if you would have loved to have them done differently, et cetera, et cetera?
I didn't realize this like the first time or even the second time I played it, but like at some point I realized, we don't really have a Juniper character. Like we don't have the protagonist BFF who's there with you. Like
Other than the rival, you mean?
I mean, rival. I wouldn't consider them like the BFF or something, but like, and even then, I don't feel like you interact with the rival quite on the same level as Juniper. But I mean, granted, outside of the romances, I didn't interact with the rival that much. I was more interested in the other characters. But like, yeah, like it doesn't even have to be a best friend. It could be maybe a member of the protagonist's family or something. Like having someone who's outside of the scene, but still interacting with the character. I think that could have been interesting. I don't hate, obviously I don't hate the game, but like that little extra touch I think could have been interesting.
For me, I feel like whilst, there are so many things that you can praise about the relationships in these games, I feel like the amount of relationship specific content is less than the first game. That I think you had more kind of like unique scenes to just kind of sit at a cafe and like talk to your love interest. There was definitely more opportunity to like get to know them, and then once you establish your relationship, then to have those kind of scenes afterwards where there's a little bit of conflict, then they come see you in the hospital after you get shot, all of those just like little scenes that kind of, when we're playing these games, we just go, oh, there's my love interest and we're talking, or like this is content specifically for me pursuing them. I feel like the new challenges has a little bit less of that. Once you get together at Pengy Paradise, there's the scene where you are struggling and you're being kind of like really hard on the team and they help you out, and then there's a scene at the end, and that's kind of it. The rest of the game kind of is played more or less the same. So I mean, I don't necessarily have like the stats to back it up, but it feels to me like there's a little bit less romance exclusive content in the second game.
I'll agree with that. I think I definitely agree. Would have loved to have had more slice of life, like as you would say. Like there isn't a conflict you have to overcome. They're just hanging out, doing whatever, and just chit chatting. Yes, I would totally have loved that once the relationship has been established. Because while I do think we got more of that in the first game. I think that I too, even in the first game, felt like we could have had more of those slice of life scenes once the relationship was established. Because I felt like when I played Percy, I had a lot of like not dates, but like hangout time with Percy, just getting to know him prior to the beach or the boardwalk stuff. And then once the boardwalk happened, we sort of like decided we were a thing. There were a few moments, but there weren't a ton. And I would have loved to have gotten more just enjoying the relationship that we had, the romantic relationship that we had. So I guess just in general, my critique is, and I totally get from Stefan's perspective, because he even mentioned that's not really his strength, is that I love in it, not just the intense friendship like content, but I also like the thirsty stuff too. Like I like the thirsty stuff. And I'm not asking for anything explicit. Like we're not talking Camp Buddy levels of stuff. But if there was like a mention of, what was it like for them to have their first kiss, or what was it like for them to I don't know, just do more romantic stuff other than just, go out to dinner and we have a lovely conversation, which I at minimum, that's what I want at minimum. So it would have been cool if we had at least the option. Maybe you could like turn it on or turn it off, especially if you're a player who wants to play a character who is aromantic. I get that. Maybe to turn it on or turn on like some extra scenes that are more focused on the physical romance, or just something beyond just the intense friendship stuff.
Yeah, well, they had something kind of like that in the first game at the very beginning, where they kind of say, like, they have you established for the character, like, are you interested in like flirting straight away,
That's
or
true.
kind of
That's
like
true.
flirting turning into kind of a relationship, or are you just not interested in romantic relationships at all? And I'm assuming
That's
at
true.
that point the romance stuff is gated off, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. So I guess if you chose, I definitely chose the all in. I'm like, give me all the romance.
Just
I
give
want
it to
everything
me.
you can throw it at me, which is why I loved when I ended up playing the rival romance, and you did get things got pretty hot and heavy.
Oh yeah.
And I loved it. I loved it. And part of me was like, I would love to have this with Loxley. Like, it's okay if I don't, but I would love it because it would be would have been icing on the cake for me.
I think Rhapsody makes like a passing comment, like joking about it, but beyond that, it's the rival romance is definitely as thirsty as it gets.
Yeah, I didn't get that much romance with the Zappa. At the end of the bonfire scene, she's like, "Want to do it?" Yeah, okay. That's it. And then it's suggested you do it and you move on to the next scene. It's like, okay, sure, that's fine. I wasn't expecting anything. That's fine.
Yeah.
I think before the fireworks finish, Rhapsody asks you if you want to join them in their hotel room. But it's like, and you can choose whether to rush off or wait until the end of the fireworks.
Yeah. And I guess other than that, the only other nitpicky critique, was I would have loved if they were able to have gotten the voice actors from the previous game to come back to reprise the roles, because when Percy like appears, it was just a mention. Yeah, like because Percy, I think your love interest calls like the main protagonist at some point. So it would have been cool to just hear Percy's voice again. I get it that's like means that they would have to shell out more money, obviously, to pay those voice actors, as they should do that if they were to do that. But that was like the one thing. It was like the only thing that I thought in my head, wouldn't it be nice if they did this that I didn't get? So I definitely appreciate that they hit everything else. But that was like the only one nitpicky thing that I would have loved.
I just love these games.
Yeah.
They're great. I didn't want to push Stefan too hard in the like, the future. But I would love another one.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure whenever the next project comes, we'll be playing the snot out of it as well.
Yeah.
So I would love to have the two of you come back again, and we can chat. And maybe if Stefan again is available, we can do something very similar here, and talk then. So cool. Well, Hannah and Roma, thank you so much for sticking around and joining me. And for those of you who decided, okay, fine, I guess I'll watch these three people talk about it without Stefan, I guess. Thank you for sticking around and listening to our musings of the game as well. If you're interested in some of the other interviews that I've done on my channel from other visual novels, I actually did an interview with not just the creator, but all of the voice actors of Seduce Me, which was super exciting. That was a fun one with all of the...
It was such a funny interview. Like, it's really just put it on the background if you're doing something, or like you'll be laughing along. It's such a fun interview.
Super grateful for Michaela and the guys for being willing to do that with me. And then something that's not directly video game related, but is tangentially, I also became friends with and interviewed Nicolas Lietzau, who was one of the main or the head writer for Enderal, which was a major mod from the Elder Scrolls Skyrim video game that Nicolas ended up writing a novel based on the character that he wrote from that mod, basically. So I'll put a link there too, because Nicolas is a very lovely person, and we also ultimately brought in the voice actor Jaspar in a follow-up interview as well. So always happy to have these kind of things on my channel. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. And until next time, love yourselves and love each other. Bye.
Bye.